All right, hello everyone. I'm going to quickly go over y'all's lab this week. So this week our lab is called Disappearing and Reappearing Salts, and basically it is a lab about your solubility rules. So towards the middle of the semester, we talked about lattice energy, which is all of the energy that is released whenever ions come together and make solid lattices and they make solids. And solubility rules are basically about interactions between your solvent and the ionic solids that you add into them. So there's a ton of energy in your lattices that make up your ionic solids, but your solvents are constantly pulling on these solids, trying to take the ions that are within them. And ultimately, if the solvent is stronger than the lattice energy of your solid, it breaks apart and makes aqueous solution. That's what happens when you put salt in water. Salt is a lattice, and then it is put in water. Water pulls on it so strong that it overcomes the energy of the lattice and it solubilizes it. But you can also have things that have been solubilized in water and are ions, and then you add another substance, and that substance causes a lattice to form, and that lattice is so strong that water cannot overcome the newly formed lattice energy, and that is how you get a solid. And so ultimately today we're going to be taking various substances that are aqueous, putting them together, and seeing if we get some sort of solid precipitate. So let's go down to your procedure a little bit. So this table here is basically your main experiment for this week. So on the top is the chemical that you're going to put in each well. You're going to fill each well up with about half of each of these solutions. So each of these wells will have halfway full with barium chloride. Each of these will be halfway full with sodium carbonate, so on and so on. And then you're going to add in a few drops of the compound on the left. So you add in a couple of drops of sodium carbonate, a few drops of sulfuric acid, sodium chloride, and so on and so on. You're going to do that one at a time, and you're going to need to make good observations on what is occurring each step. So you need to tell me if a precipitate formed, which would be seen by some cloudiness in your solution. Talk about any bubbles that may have formed. Talk about um, the rate at which it formed, things like that. This is largely lab based off of your observations, so you need to take good ones this week if you want to be able to do your report. And then part two, you're going to take one of your columns from your barium chlorides, one of your columns from your magnesium sulfates, and you are going to then you're going to make 4 test tubes for each column, and you're going to test them under various conditions. So you're going to heat it up, you're going to try and dilute it, you're going to add acid, you're going to add base, and you're going to see if you can take that precipitate that had formed initially and see if you can resolubilize it. So that is pretty much your experiment. So let's talk about your data analysis. So question one of your data analysis is asking you to organize the observations about your precipitates that formed, which of them are similar and different, what was common, and if there are any unique observations. This goes completely back to the observations you made during your experiment. You're just going to compare and contrast the various things that form precipitates and see if you can come up with any common traits. So this is a 2-point question for your report. So I expect pretty detailed answers here on what was similar and what was different, if any of them stood out to you. Question 2 is a 4-part question here. So the first 3 questions are all asking about ions. So 2A asks, determine what combinations of ions result in the formation of a precipitate. Were there any common ions in all of your precipitates? And what combination of ions did not form precipitates? So since I'm talking about ions for each of these questions, I need you to give me the element and the charge of the ions. That's what an ion is it is a charged element. So make sure you're including your charge. It doesn't need to be superscripted or subscripted or anything. You just need to put like sodium plus with the plus sign right next to sodium. Otherwise, I can't give you full credit. So talk about what ions mainly form precipitates and which of them did not form precipitates at all, and you'll get your points for those questions. And then 2D is asking you to use this information from 2A through C and suggest the ionic formulas for the precipitates that you saw. And so what this is you're going to talk about the molecules that you believed formed. So I actually have an example over here. This is what is called a net ionic equation. So for this reaction, they combined magnesium chloride and silver nitrate, and they got a solid, which was silver chloride. And so what question 2E is asking for here is just the ionic formula of the precipitates that you thought you saw. So if you did this reaction and you think your precipitate was silver chloride, I just need to know that you think silver chloride is the precipitate for this question. Now, for question 1 of your discussion, this wants you to write a chemical equation for each precipitate. So this kind of is piggybacking question 2D. So I want you to begin with your aqueous ions and then only include ions that produce the precipitate. So that's what the bottom half of this is right here, the net ionic equation. This is exactly what I want to see. If you think that silver chloride was formed, I just want to see silver with a positive charge, aqueous, chloride with a negative charge, aqueous, forms silver chloride, solid. You do not need to include magnesium or nitrate. These are called spectator ions, since they just form, they don't really form any new solution. They're still aqueous, they just associate with each other, but they don't precipitate and make a product. So all I want to see is this right here, silver ion, silver chloride, obviously replacing with the ions that are actually involved. Questions 2 through 4 are all very simple. They're based off of what you did in step 7, where you took those previous precipitates and applied new conditions to them. You're just going to talk about what you saw. Very simple. And then question 5, this one's asking you to use the results from this experiment to try and predict if you're going to get any precipitates from these 3 reactions, and then what those precipitates are. So you can both use your data and you can also use solubility rules you find online to determine what you think will precipitate, if anything precipitates, from these reactions. And the last thing you're expected to do is it's asking you to write a results and discussion sections and then uploading those. I am not going to ask for a discussion section this week because what I would want y'all to do is literally copy and paste your answers from these and just put them in paragraph form. Since you're already answering these, I don't see the point of that. So I'm not going to make y'all do that. What I am expecting is a results section. So what I want you to do is I want you to make a table just like this, where you have your dropped solutions here and your solutions that were initially in the wells, and just include in each box if you saw a precipitate and then brief description of each precipitate. That's it. And that'll be your table. I want a title like this. Please don't include this title. Make up a new one. Uh, and then a brief description. Upload that. That's your results section. And then you'll add that on to the very end of your report. So that's your lab this week. If you have any questions, feel free to talk to me tomorrow in lab or to email me throughout the week. I hope this was helpful. Oh, before I go, um, it tells you that you need to include properly formatted references. Don't include references. Okay, now I'm done.